and here at The Charm of It, I provide reviews that celebrate the lighter side of board games. I tend to prefer board games that fit into my life instead of ones that require me to fit my life around them, and so hopefully my reviews will help you decide if a certain game fits into your life as well. Today I'm going to be reviewing Forbidden Island, which is a 2 to 4 player game, which is supposed to play in 30 minutes for players aged 10 and up. And what's really neat about this one is that it's cooperative. When I started looking into modern board games as a hobby a few months ago, I had no idea what a cooperative game was. So in case you're in the same boat as me, what makes a cooperative game different is that instead of in a traditional game where players are competing against each other in order to try to get the highest score, in a cooperative games, all of the players are on a team together and they are working with each other in order to try to defeat the game itself. So you all either win or lose as a team, and throughout the game, you're on each other's sides. I absolutely love this mechanic because it leads to a lot of interaction. You're always discussing strategies amongst each other and figuring out who can help where and what would be best to do this round. And I really like that sense of camaraderie, the fact that when you have a really good idea, you don't have to keep it to yourself. You can immediately share it with the group. And I just think it's really wonderful to feel as if you're on a team with your friends and family when you're playing a game, instead of feeling like you need to play better than them. The one downside of cooperative games is, of course, if you all win together, then you all lose together. So depending on your personality, it might or might not be for you. But if you've never tried one before, I would highly suggest them. And I think that Forbidden Island is a perfect introduction to cooperative games. So let me tell you about why it's so fun to play. I've already told you that, like most other cooperative games, there's going to be a lot of interaction between you and your fellow players, which is really appealing because obviously if you're sitting around a table wanting to spend time with someone, then presumably you want to talk with them. And I really like how all of that interaction is positive because you're all working towards the same goal. So at no point are you trying to hurt each other or mess each other up. Instead, you're all trying to make sure that you're putting everyone in the best possible position to get everything done that you need to get done in order to win the game. So it's a really great, positive, constant interaction. Now, Forbidden Island is a little different from the other cooperative games I've played in that the balance is a lot more even between the players and the game. Most other cooperative games that I've played, the balance is very much in favor of the game because that makes it more challenging and it creates for more replayability because it takes you longer to figure out how to win. But Forbidden Island was designed to be a simple, engaging introduction to cooperative games, and therefore it's a little easier to beat than most. And the way that they've done that is to kind of make the balance much more even between the game and the players. Each player will have a special ability depending on their role, and these special abilities are very powerful, and they help mitigate the bad things that the game is going to do to try to make you lose. And I think that that's a really great balance for an introductory game because that way you're not going to lose heart or just realize that you've played the game 4 times and you haven't won at all, so maybe you should just not play that game. Instead, this really rewards people who don't have experience with cooperative gameplay. There is a bit of luck in Forbidden Island, and I would say that most of that luck is going to be right at the beginning when you're setting up the game. So the island itself consists of 24 tiles that you lay out in the same pattern each time, but the tiles themselves vary in location. And within these 24 tiles, there are 9 extra important tiles. And depending on how close together those tiles are and how close they are to the starting points of each player's pawn, it can be a little bit easier or a little bit harder to complete your objectives and win the game. The other way that luck is an important part of this setup is that when you are beginning the game, before any rounds have even started, 6 of the 24 tiles are already flooded. And all you do is flip over the top 6 cards of the flood deck in order to find out which tiles these are. And as I mentioned, out of 24 tiles in a game, 9 of them are more important than the other ones. And so if those tiles come up in that initial flooding, you are going to have to work harder to make sure that those tiles don't sink, and so that too is going to make the game a little bit more challenging. After you get through setup, there really isn't a lot of luck as far as the gameplay goes. Sure, you're drawing cards, so there's a bit of luck there, but it's not a very large deck, and so you can kind of guess what's going to come out based on what cards you've already seen or what cards are already in your hand. And so you're not going to usually lose the game because of an unlucky draw or two. It may make it a little more challenging or a little easier, but overall I would say that after the setup is out of the way, luck is not a huge factor, which is nice. I absolutely love the aesthetics of Forbidden Island. If you love the cover of the box, then I'm sure that you will love the artwork as well, because each of the tiles is like its own little world, but the aesthetic feel is very united and is definitely true to that box cover, which is absolutely wonderful. In addition to the artwork on the tiles, you are collecting 4 different treasures, and they are actually little 3D figurines that you can pick up when you have successfully acquired one. And I really like that. I think that it adds to the immersion of the game, and it makes you feel more like you're on the island trying to collect the treasures. So visually, I think that this game is very appealing. I also love it from a tactile perspective. You're frequently flipping the tiles over. And I just, for some reason, really enjoy reaching out and flipping the tiles. I find it very satisfying. The tiles are a nice, sturdy cardboard, and then once they're flooded, they're a different color on the back, which really helps make it seem like they're underwater and makes it really easy to see at a glance where the danger zones are on the board. And I really enjoy flipping them back and forth. The cards are easy to shuffle, which is nice because you will be shuffling several times. And the pawns themselves are quite simple, but they work and they fit well into the game. So overall, I have nothing but good things to say about this game's aesthetics. Forbidden Island has built in a bit of variability. First of all, every time you set up the game, the location of the tiles in the island is going to be a little bit different, and that can affect gameplay. Also, there are 6 roles included for players, even though the maximum player count is 4. And so that means that each time you play, you'll be seeing a few roles that you haven't seen the time before, and you can see how these special powers work in different combinations. And if you're usually playing with a lower player count, that gives you even more variability. There's also a built-in variability for the difficulty factor, in that before you start the game, you can choose between 4 different levels, which is definitely nice because it means as you start the game, you can start on the lowest level and then increase it as you become more familiar so that you're continuing to have a bit of a challenge. However, I find that once you have played a few games and figured out your best strategy, every game you're going to use that same strategy. So even though it might be a little bit different based on what roles you're playing or how the tiles end up laying out, it generally feels like you're playing minor tweaks on the same game instead of an entirely new game. Forbidden Island really shines when it comes to questions of how easy is it to play. First of all, logistically, setup time is quite short. Once you are familiar with the game, it takes around 5 minutes. That first time or two, it might take closer to 10. But either way, you can get this on the table quite quickly after deciding that you want to play a game. The duration of the game is around 30 minutes, maybe 40, depending on how chatty your group of players is. As far as table size, I can fit this on my fairly small coffee table. It definitely is a tight fit. I can't put a drink on there with the game. But as I said, my coffee table is quite small, and this will fit easily on those square tables that you find in a lot of cafes and coffee shops. So it will certainly fit on any dining room table, and since the game is at its largest at the beginning, then that's nice because you don't have to worry about it growing later. It's also fairly portable. Now, it's not going to fit in a pocket or in most purses, but you can see from the size, there's the width, that it would definitely fit in a tote bag, and I have brought this with me on trips, The rules of Forbidden Island are really simple and easy to learn, so even if you have no background in modern board games, you will quickly find yourself having a really fun, enjoyable experience. The rulebook itself is nicely laid out, it's easy to follow, and key rules are highlighted, as well as various summary lists that make it quite easy to read and understand what you're supposed to be doing. In addition, the rules have really been simplified so that players have very few action options on their turn, which makes those choices simpler. And then during the game's turn itself, everything is also very straightforward, so that within a round or two, even if you've never played before, you will get a sense for it, and everything just flows together and feels very organic. The game's rules fit the theme and the ideas beautifully, and it really makes for a fun, wonderful game that doesn't feel at all fiddly. You don't have to refer to the rule books and check to see what's going to happen in a special case very often. And honestly, after your first game or two, you won't need to refer to the rule book at all. There are player reference cards included for each player, so that way, as everyone's sitting there, they can quickly see what they can do with their turn as well as what their special power is, which makes it even easier to both teach new players and play a lot of games yourself without ever having to take out the rulebook. Finally, I would like to touch on how much mental effort is required to play Forbidden Island. I realize that this is a very subjective and amorphous category, but it really affects how frequently I pull a game off the shelf, and so I would like to include it in these reviews. For me, on the scale of relaxing to requiring a lot of concentration, Forbidden Island is definitely on the relaxing end. This is a weeknight game for me and even a Netflix alternative, so that even if I've had a rough day or a long day and I am feeling pretty tired, I would still be willing to play this one. And I will say that it's more relaxing now than it was at the beginning because I've played a few times and I have figured out what strategy works best. So I already know going in what the big picture is, and it's more seeing how that picture is going to change from the last game versus trying to create an entirely new strategy each time. So if you've never played cooperative games before or you've never played modern board games before, this is going to require more concentration for those early plays. However, once you've played it several times, then I think it'll fall into the relaxing category for you as well. I think that Forbidden Island set out to be an enjoyable, accessible, and engaging introduction to board games and cooperative board games to people who don't have a background in them. And to me, it succeeded perfectly in that goal. Its suggested retail price is $18. You can frequently find it for even less on online retailers. And for that cost, not only do you get an incredibly elegant, interesting puzzle to solve with your friends and family, but you also get the wonderful visual and tactile components of the game. I think it's a really good value, and if you're looking for a simple game for whatever reason, whether it's because you're not sure if you like cooperative games yet, whether it's because you're looking for something relaxing to play on the weeknights, or something to play with your children or friends who you know wouldn't be interested in a heavier game, then Forbidden Island is an absolutely wonderful choice. If you're looking for something very complicated and with a lot of hidden layers that won't reveal themselves until you've played 10 to 20 times, then obviously Forbidden Island is not going to be for you. But I think that there's a real value in how beautifully simple Forbidden Island is. To me, it's a very deliberate and intentional choice on the designer's part, and I'm really glad that games like this are on the market because it means that I have another game to play on the weeknight, and I can play it cooperatively, so I am not pitting myself against any of my friends and family. Instead, we're all working together. And even as someone who has figured out an ideal strategy that tends to win pretty much every time, I still really enjoy putting this on the table just because it's such a fun, immersive experience. And so I highly recommend Forbidden Island, with the caveat that it is intentionally simple, so don't get it if you're looking for something complicated. I hope you enjoyed this review. I would love to hear from you either here on YouTube or over on Instagram, where I am also the charm of it. And you will always find links to the publisher's page, the Board Game Geek page, and a rules video down below in case you need to learn even more about the game before deciding whether it's for you or not. Until next time, happy gaming!